to see everything that they did last week, okay? So when we were together last Monday, we began a unit on autobiographical narratives. And you need your textbook, well, no, you don't. We're not going to worry about that. Okay, so there are two things that I want you to know. We did already take notes on it. So if you missed last Monday, you need to take notes today. Okay, so you're going to have two tabs. One in your literature tab. You need to, if you're on OneNote, you need to create a piece of paper that says nonfiction, autobiographical narratives. Or if you have a 3-ring binder, you don't have a tablet that you bring to class. In your 3-ring binder, underneath your literature section, you need to make a note page that says nonfiction, autobiographical narratives. You also need to make a page in your vocabulary tab that says autobiographical narrative vocab. We'll get to this second. So we're going to start here, okay? So that's what you need to have. And I've written it right here. Notes on autobiographical narratives, lit tab, and then you're going to need vocab words under vocab tab. And then they need to say autobiographical narrative vocab words. So AN vocab words, okay? All right. So last week we started this unit talking about autobiographical narratives. Somebody tell me what an let's talk about a definition for autobiographical narratives. We defined it when we were together. But start first with what is an autobiography. Tell me, Mason, what's an autobiography? Can't remember. Bennett.
It's a book or a narrative by a person about themselves.
Right.
Autobiographical narrative or nonfiction autobiography?
Same, either way, nonfiction, or nonfiction, autobiographical narratives. Okay, so it is a story written by a valid person, by that person, right? So that's what it, auto meaning auto, self, bio meaning life, graph meaning words. So it is a story written about somebody's life. And a narrative is what we know as a story. Everybody got that? The autobiographical story or autobiographical narrative is a story written about somebody's life who wrote it about themselves, right? So Victoria wrote an autobiographical narrative. Dallas, who is Victoria, that story going to be about? Victoria, very good. What if Bennett wrote a biographical narrative about Victoria? Okay, then I just messed up. Yeah, I did. Okay. All right, so autobiographical narratives, if you were not here on Monday, you need to have a piece of paper out, if not your OneNote, and you need to write this definition. An autobiographical narrative, it tells the story from a writer's own life, okay? So everybody let's do this. Everybody open your 3-ring binder and turn in it to your writing tab, okay? Or no, your literature tab. 3-ring binder, open it to your literature tab. And everybody, if you were here last Monday, you should already have notes that say nonfiction, autobiographical narrative. If you don't have that, do it now, all right? And then you want to write this definition. Autobiographical narrative tells the story from a writer's own life. All right, let me ask you this, Cole. Can it be just one story from that writer's life, or does it have to be the entire story of their life from birth to present? What? Whatever they want, absolutely. So that would be the second detail you need to write about an autobiographical narrative. Lamar, open your 3-ring binder. Okay, let me see your 3-ring binder open. You have your tabs. You gotta have your tabs. That will help you. So when you go back and study, because y'all are going to have a test on this, and I'm going to ask you questions like, true or false? An autobiographical narrative has to be the entire author's life stories. And you would say what? False. Very good. All right. So, or I could say, define autobiographical narrative. And you could say, it's a story from the writer's own life. Okay? Everybody should have that written down in their notes. Okay? Is an autobiographical narrative fiction or nonfiction?
Nonfiction.
It is very nonfiction. You are right, because it is actual true stories from somebody's life. If they make up characters, if they make up settings, but they mix in it with it some real facts, is it fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction, but not historical.
Yes, it'd be fiction. Very good. But it could be sort of like historical fiction. Okay. When do we use autobiographical narratives? Anybody remember? Yes.
When you're like telling the story of something in the past.
Right. So what about this morning's journal topic? Was that an autobiographical narrative?
Yes.
Yeah, it was. If you told a story, I said described your experience with Hurricane Sally, but if you actually told a story about I did this and then I did this and then I did this, well, guess what? It's an autobiographical narrative. So when do we use autobiographical narratives? Journals. This would be a great test question. Give me an example of when you use autobiographical narratives. You could say journals. You could say eyewitness accounts. Like if you have to write down, hey, I saw this. Let's say you see an accident happening and the police come to you and ask for you to give a report. That is an example of an autobiographical narrative. You're going to tell from your side of the story how it happened, okay? We were in Iraq after the hurricane, and the police came, and we had to tell an autobiographical narrative. We were driving this way. The car turned into us. It busted our tire. So that was an autobiographical narrative. Yes, for somebody. I don't want to say I got in a wreck. Somebody hit us. Yeah, I'm fine. All right. My car is okay. So reflective essays. Here's another example of when you use autobiographical essays. Our autobiographical narratives. On college essays, they will ask you, tell me about a time you ... It could be, tell me about a challenge you experienced in your life and how you overcame. Tell me about a happy experience. Those are all going to be autobiographical narratives, okay? And y'all, you may think, I'm not going to have to write an essay for college. I'm not going to a college that needs a college essay. But guess what? The ACT, do y'all know this? The ACT is kind of on the way out. Many colleges are saying you don't have to take this ACT. And guess what's going to become more important? If the ACT goes out, college essays are going to be more important. Why? Because this is how that colleges will use to judge you and who you are.
I already took the ACT. They better not do that.
Well, some colleges will still use them for scholarships and stuff. And I'm not saying the ACT they haven't gotten rid of totally, but I'm going to say in the next 10 years, probably for you, the ACT will probably go by the wayside. Job applications also usually ask like for example, and I told them this last Monday, like when I came to work for Cottage Hill, they wanted to know my personal story of coming to know Christ. Well, that was an autobiographical narrative. I had to tell them how I came to know Christ. And so that would be an example of job applications asking you to use autobiographical narratives. Okay. Now, here's the next thing that you need to write in your notes. Autobiographical narratives include the author's perspective. What does that mean to you, Cole? What's the author's perspective? What? Okay, how the author views the situation. Absolutely. Bryce, you said something else. First person, point of view. So the author's point of view is always going to be first person in autobiographical narratives. So are they going to use pronouns like I, me, we, us? What do you think? Yes. So when you are going to actually write your own autobiographical narrative, and you don't have to ask me, Miss Brother Stewart, can I write it in first person? Yes, you can. It's an autobiographical narrative, okay? Author's perspective also includes the judgments, the attitudes, and the experience the author brings to the subject, okay? So, do you think the author will express their opinions in an autobiographical narrative?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Will they express their feelings, do you think?
Yes.
Possibly. That's totally appropriate. So their own experiences, their own judgments, their own attitudes, their own opinions, their own emotions, all those things are going to come with an autobiographical narrative. So that being said, do you think that autobiographical narratives tend to be objective or subjective? Objective?
Subject.
Yeah, subjective. Remember, sub means, I mean, you can think, sub means under, so under the author's influence. That means that it includes opinions and feelings. Objectives is just facts and information. Now, that doesn't mean autobiographical narratives can be objective, but most of the time they are subjective, okay? They include those feelings, those emotions, all right? Okay. We talked on last Monday about this woman, Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou, and she is most famous for writing autobiographical narratives, okay? I want to tell you a little bit about her. She's one of my favorite authors of all time, and I'll tell you why. And she wrote autobiographical narratives, so we're about to read one of her autobiographical narratives as an example of author's perspective and point of view, right? So she grew up, she was born in 1928, and she grew up in a time in our nation's history. She's an African-American woman. She grew up in a time where our country was going through segregation and then desegregation, okay? She died, I believe, in 2014. So she lived in a time where blacks and whites did not associate together. And whites may, not all, but some made blacks feel like they were less. And she lived through that. And then she also lived through the time where our country began to change and things began to become integrated instead of segregated. And she writes about all those experiences, and it's part of why I love her. She went through some really, really hard times, but she learned from them, she grew from them, and she gained so much wisdom. And in her writing, she shares with us that wisdom. So I want you to know, in the example that we're going to read, she uses the word Negro. And Negro, in our day and age in 2020, we see that as sort of a derogatory term. But for her, in her day and age, and when she grew up, Negro was just a word that was used to describe skin color, like black, white, okay? Just remember, we don't use the word Negro anymore, and it would be offensive if we did, but I want you to know that when she uses it, she's not using it as a derogatory term. She's just using it like a color. Does that make sense? So she doesn't mean it that way, because she's an African-American woman. So, and I want y'all to know, I love her. I think she's an amazing writer, but I also think she was an amazing woman. And she was a trailblazer for how we should all be and live. So I just want you to kind of know, she tells her stories. But so all the hard things she went through, they weren't in vain. She actually used them so we could learn from them. Okay? All right. Any questions about autobiographical narratives? Any questions about author's perspective? Does everybody understand why we're going to read something from her? Because she wrote a ton of autobiographical narratives. Okay. So I'm going to skip. We watched a little video about her. We're not going to do that today.
There's an African.
Okay. So I'm going to hand out to you, and I'm going to take this up. So this is not your copy. This is the autobiographical narrative I want you to read about her. And in it, there are some vocabulary words. As a class, we defined those vocabulary words last week. If you were not here last Monday, you need to do that in your vocab section. You need to have A in vocab, and then it's going to come from this, okay? And I will give you the definition, so all you have to do is write them down, okay? But you want it to be in your vocabulary tab. Okay. This story is about Maya Angelou, and it is about how she traveled when she left her parents and traveled all by herself with her 4-year-old brother from Long Beach, California, all the way to Stance, Arkansas. So across the country, okay? And what? Well, we're going to restart it in that I'm going to read quickly through the part that we read together. And your vocab words, we will come across them. All right, so I want you to follow along with your eyeballs, and I want you to make sure you have these vocabulary words written down. All right, so I want you to follow along. When I was 3 and Bailey 4, we had arrived in the musty little town wearing tags on our wrists which instructed to whom it may concern that we were Marguerite and Bailey Johnson Jr. from Long Beach, California, en route to Stamps, Arkansas, care of Miss Annie Henderson. Anybody know what en route means? ENROUTE? It means on the way. Very good. And anybody know what C/O means? It means care of. So what care of means is if you are mailing something to someone, you would put care of, like if you were mailing something to someone that was not their actual address. Like if you wanted to send me a letter at Cottage Hill Christian Academy, you could put Mrs. Broders and you could put care of CHCA. So what that tells you is that letter's going to CHCA, and then when it gets there, it's going to be to me. So these kids were going to Miss Annie Henderson. That's who they were going to be in care of. All right. So does anybody see an author's perspective? There is one word in that first paragraph that gives you the author's perspective about the setting. What? Musty. Very good. My other class could not remember that. All right. So how does the author feel about Arkansas? It's musty. What else? She says it's a little musty town, right? So is that how you would describe a place that you think is fabulous that everybody should spend their vacation going to?
Nope.
No. So do you get author's perspective right there in the setting? Absolutely. It says our parents had decided to put an end to their calamitous marriage. That's your first vocabulary word. What does the word calamitous mean? Disastrous. Very good. So if you were not here on Monday, you want to, underneath your vocabulary tab, you want to write the word number 1, calamitous, and you want to write this definition involving calamity, disastrous. We are going to have a test or a quiz on Friday, and it will include information about autobiographical narratives, but it will also include this vocabulary. This is the only time you'll see it, so make sure you write it down so you can study it. Okay? So our parents had decided to put an end to their calamitous marriage, and father shipped us home to his mother. A porter had been charged with our welfare. He got off the train the next day in Arizona, and our tickets were pinned to my brother's inside coat pocket. All right, here's your next vocabulary word, porter. A porter is a person who is employed to carry luggage and other loads, especially in the railroad station, airport, or hotel. All right, so what has just happened? Dallas, what's just happened to Maya Angelou and her brother Bailey? Yes, they got left by the porter. So think about California to Arkansas. Think about where Arizona is from here to there. Okay, it's not very far. So they had to go a long way without an adult, right? Okay. Does she give you any author's perspective in this second paragraph?
No. Wait, yes.
What is it? There's one more.
Oh, it's like their parents wanted to.
Yes, she gives you a judgment on her parents' marriage, right? Was it a good, happy marriage? No, it was calamitous. That's her perspective, right? And you see she's using first person, I, our. Okay. I don't remember much of the trip. This is the third paragraph. Follow along. I don't remember much of the trip, but after we reached the segregated southern part of the journey, things must have looked up. Negro passengers who always traveled with loaded lunch boxes felt sorry for the poor little motherless darlings and plied us with cold fried chicken and potato salad. All right, so she's giving us insight into what the setting is. Remember, setting includes time and place. What time in our nation's history is it? Okay, so we know she was born in 1928, and she's 3. So what year is this? 1931. And what is going on in race relations in the United States on 1931, according to her?
White people racist?
They are. So not all of them, but some of them. And she says when we got to the segregated South, so it tells you what part of the country segregation was really prominent.
Border would be like
So here's the definition of a porter. It would have been like their guardian, but somebody who their parents actually paid to travel with them. Okay. All right. So what does it mean that they plied them, the poor little motherless darlings, they plied them with cold fried chicken? What does that word plied mean? They loaded them up. That's a great translation. So this word plied means to keep, furnishing, or supplying. Or you can put Bennett's definition, load them up. I like that. So did things get better for the children when they got towards the South? What do you think? Even though it was segregated? Why? Because people gave them food, and that's what she was most worried about.
Could you give me the real definition of plied?
The real definition is up there. Reneged is that word. But we've got a fluent in there before reneged. I didn't highlight a fluent, but you want to. All right. So I'm going to keep reading. I don't remember much of the trip, but after we reached the segregated, oh no, we did that. All right. Years later. Okay. So years later, what's happening?
It's a flash.
It's kind of a flash forward, right? It's the opposite of a flashback. Years later, I discovered that the United States had been crossed thousands of times by frightened Black children traveling alone to their newly affluent parents in northern cities or back to their grandmothers in southern towns when the urban North reneged on its economics promises. That word reneged, it doesn't look like it would be pronounced that way, but it is pronounced reneged. So there are two words in there. What's the word affluent mean? Means wealthy, okay? Having sufficient means. So what does she realize? Years later, Lamar, what does she realize? She has this light bulb moment years later. What does she realize? Right, she wasn't the only, you're not, thank you, Lamar, or Bryce, for Lamar. Oh, gotcha. Okay, so Bryce, that is a wonderful inference and conclusion. She realizes, hey, I'm not the only person who's ever done this. Thousands of other children did it for different reasons. So maybe the parents went north and tried to make a lot of money, and if they did, they were affluent, they would then bring their children up north. Or let's say they went up north to make a bunch of money and it failed, and so they would have to ship their children back to their grandmothers in the South. So she said, I realized I wasn't the only person who had done this. Like thousands of other children had done this. All right, this word reneged means to go back on a promise, an undertaking, or a contract. All right, does everybody understand what's going on? How do you think Maya Angelou felt about this situation? Okay, but look at the passage. What does the passage say? You want proof or evidence from the passage. How do you think she felt? And tell me what from the passage. Dre, how do you think she felt?
She felt kind of like relieved that she wasn't the only one.
Okay, I like how you used a detail from the sentence. Very good. What else? Anybody other ideas? Was this a bad, negative experience? Was it a neutral experience? Was it a positive experience? Neutral, okay. Does everybody agree? Anybody think it was bad?
I mean, I don't think it was totally bad, but I don't think it was like good. Like, it was just kind of like,
Okay. All right. So keep reading. We're in the 5th paragraph. The town reacted to us. All right. So the town, what town is it?
It's
Stamps, Arkansas, and it's musty, little town, right? Says the town reacted to us as its inhabitants had reacted to all things new before our coming. It regarded us a while without curiosity, but with caution. And after we were seen to be harmless and children, it closed in around us as a real mother embraces a stranger's child, warmly, but not too familiarly. So does she give you author's perspective right here on how the town reacted to them? Okay, so Lamar, how did the town react to them? Yeah, okay, how did they react to him at first, though? Not at first. No, look at the passage. Don't guess. You got to give me evidence. Dallas, how did they react at first? I love how you gave me your own word. How do you know they were skeptical? What did she say?
person is going to react to obvious They regarded us without curiosity but with caution.
That's right. You're absolutely right. So they regarded them with caution, right? Okay. So, but then it says they came in around us. That's imagery right there for that big old hug. They got embraced. So, how do you think, Maya Angelou, looking back, does she have positive feelings about Stamps, Arkansas, or negative feelings? What do you think? And tell me why from the passage.
I think neutral again. There's not really like massive positiveness. It was kind of negative at first. Kind of, okay. And then eventually they loved them, so that's like a positive. So I think it's like a negative and positive. Neutral.
Okay. All right. Anybody want to differ with Bennett? What do you think, Mason? Negative or positive or neutral?
Neutral, but then it kind of got better. So like, I say positive.
Why?
I mean, it was bad at first, kind of, because no one really sort of welcomed them at first, but then they did.
So all's well that ends well? Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, so let's keep going. We live with our grandmother and our uncle. I don't think there were any more. Nope. We live with our grandmother and our uncle in the rear of the store. It was always spoken of with, did I? What?
That's later.
Not yet. Yeah. And there are actually two more, I think. We live with our grandmother and our uncle at the rear of the store. It was always spoken of with a capital S, which she owned some 25 years. Early in the century, Mama, who we soon stopped calling her grandmother, sold lunches to the sawmen in the lumberyard in East Stamps and the seedmen at the cotton gin, West Stamps. Her crisp meat pies and her cool lemonade, when joined with her miraculous ability to be in two places at the same time, assured her business success. From being a mobile lunch counter, she set up a stand between the 2 points of fiscal interest and supplied the workers' needs for a few years. Okay, so your next vocabulary word that we did not get to last Monday, so everybody should write this down, is fiscal. So it means something related to finances or public revenue. So her grandmother, how would you describe her grandmother? It says she knew what everybody's needs were and she was able to sell them what they needed. So how would you describe her grandmother?
A loving person who likes to give.
A loving person who likes to give. I'm going to describe her differently. Anybody want to give a different adjective for her? Victoria, what would you say? A hard worker? I would say a hard worker. I like what Bryce said too. Bryce, what did you say? A businesswoman. She was an entrepreneur. She figured out who needed what and then how to sell it to them, right? Okay, that's brilliant. Think about it. That happens, like that'll happen after this hurricane. There will be people who will be modifying their trucks and going around and getting paid by the city to pick up and haul away debris. That's a business person. That person who can see, hey, there's a need here. I'm going to make money off of it. That's what the grandmother is doing, okay? So it says, over the years, it became, okay, then she had, okay, so she sold all this, and then it says she had the store built in the heart. Yeah, there we are. Then she had the store built in the heart of the Negro era. Over the years, it became a lay center of activities in town. On Saturdays, barbers sat their customers in the shade of the porch of the store, and troubadours, on their ceaseless crawlings through the South, leaned across its benches, and they sang their sad songs of the Brazos, while they played juice harps and cigar box guitars. All right, so what do you think a troubadour is? Anybody?
Like travelers?
They are travelers, and what do they do when they travel? We didn't do it last Monday. We did it today. All right, come on, y'all. What do you think a troubadour does when they travel, Dre? No.
They crawl through the south.
No. What do they do, Tenario?
Oh, I know.
Read, if you don't know, read those last two sentences. They sing. They're traveling musicians. Troubadour, a composer and a singer of music, especially. It gets its name from France. This is a group of people who traveled and sang back in France in the Middle Ages. Okay? So, a traveling singer. Yep. Add troubadour to your vocabulary list. Tell me this. Draw an inference and a conclusion. How do you think she felt about her time in Arkansas? Huh?
I guess it started to feel like home after a while.
Give me an example. Bennett said it started to feel like home after a while. How do you give me a detail that tells you that?
She said she called her grandma mama.
Absolutely, Bryce. That's exactly what I was looking for. She quits calling grandma mama. Okay, here's what I want you to do for the remainder of the class period. I want you to finish reading this story. It's just about a page left. And then for when you leave here today, I want you to give me an exit slip. I want you to write your name on it, and I want you to tell me, do you think Maya Angelou's memories about Arkansas were positive, negative, and neutral? And I want you to give me one detail from the story that supports which one you chose, okay? So you have to have, this has to be from the story to support why you think this. Okay, so put your name on the piece of paper, and I will take up both the story and the paper before you leave, okay?
What about if you have a computer?
Do it on a piece of paper because you got to turn it in.
I like school Jackson.
You got about 5 minutes, 6 minutes to do it.
What do we go to about like school Jackson? Oh, I know that's about online.
Okay, hey guys, you have an assignment. This is not discussion. Bryce, this is not discussion.
It's not the 14th. But the 21st, right?
Correct. What? As many as you need to give your details. Yep, thank you. It's just right here. Was her experience in Arkansas positive, negative, or neutral, and one detail to support? And you know what? If y'all will turn your stories in and your answer, did you turn your story in? Okay. Cool.
You got the phone?
Yeah, don't forget your phone. Where's your exit slip? You want to turn that in when you leave?
Read our book.
No, because all you have from him tonight is your final draft.
How many? What was that exit slip again?
You had to write if her experience in Arkansas was positive, negative, or neutral, and give one detail from the story that tells why.
This bird.
Yeah.
Living honest, I got a 0 this whole day.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, you get my phone.
Thank you. Bye. Y'all have a good afternoon. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Don't forget your drafts are due. Okay, I'll write it down, thank you.